Hey all, quick introduction to this new channel. This is Confessions of a Removal Expert. I'm 43 years old, and for the last 20 years, I've spent my entire career in the death industry, mainly removal and transport of human remains. I'm different in the fact that most people who end up doing something in the funeral industry usually get their funeral director's license and they end up working for a funeral home, and they kind of do all aspects of funeral care. The only thing that I do is pick up and transport, just removals. And over the last 20 years, I've worked alongside coroners, funeral homes, organ and tissue recovery, body donation facilities, and I also transport organs, mostly kidneys. And I'm just here to tell my stories from my perspective and answer questions. There may be some people who want to get into this, maybe some people who don't, probably most people who don't. It's been a unique experience. I've loved a lot of it. I always thought it was my calling. And there's also been some really terrible parts of it, and that's probably mostly how any job is. But it was something that I was able to do and that I was good at. And it's one of those jobs where it's not super hard to be okay at it, but it's incredibly difficult to be really, really good at it, because you just never know what you're going to run into. I've got a lot of stories, and I'm going to try to cover a lot of content and go over a lot of things and answer a lot of questions. And that's pretty much it. So for the first story, I decided to kind of just start off with a big one. What's the craziest call I've ever been on? And I actually just got done working, and I was going over in my head, like, what's the craziest call I've ever been on? And it's difficult because there's been so many. I mean, over the last 20 years, I've probably picked up and transported 20 to 25,000 bodies. I've been doing this full time, 24 hours a day. All hours of the night, weekends, holidays. Of course, I had some time off in there, but I've had a lot of quantity with this. I've done a lot of calls. And to pick just one is so difficult. And probably more than half of them I don't even remember. But the one that really sticks out into my head was, it was a coroner call. Years, this was a lot of years ago, probably more than 10 years ago. It was in the summertime. It was really hot. And if I remember right, I think it was maybe in the Obama days when gas prices were really high. And all kinds of people in this big metropolitan area just started riding motorcycles because gas was so expensive. Anyways, this guy went into a parking lot. He hooked up a 200-foot long cable to a telephone pole and the other end of the cable to his neck. Hops on the motorcycle, takes off. Took his head clean off. So the coroner calls us, we get down there. The crazy thing was his body actually stayed on the motorcycle for maybe 30 or 40 feet, and his head stayed back. So we got his body in the bag. And by the way, the coroners don't put the body in the bag for us. We have to do that. That's part of the reason why they contract out with us, is because they don't want to do it. So we get his body in the bag, and then I had to go back and pick up his head. So I'm walking through a parking lot carrying a head, a human head, and part of his spinal cord was still dangling down, and there's just blood dripping. And I remember thinking, like, how did I get here in my life? Like, how did I end up here? It's very surreal. And it's hard. It's very, very hard sometimes. I mean, it's tragic. And then you start to think about, this guy was so depressed that he decided to take his life. And then the way he decided to do it. Like, just absolutely insane. So that's probably one of the more shocking ones that I have. And, you know, I always tell people, somebody's got to do it. Somebody, you know, these things happen and somebody has to do it. And it just so happens that I was that guy for a lot of years. And you have to learn how to separate yourself, because if you get too emotional, it'll just eat you up. So it's really strange. You have to kind of like almost not care, but you have to care. That's the best way I can describe it. So yeah, that one always has stood out in my mind. And most of the time, if I end up talking to people and they ask me what's the craziest thing you've ever seen, that's usually the one that pops into my head. And if anybody else did it, they may have forgotten about it, but that was just the one that really stuck out in my head. And it was horrible. But anyways, that's my first video and first story to tell. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to comment or ask the question in the comment. Like and subscribe so I can get this channel going. Thank you very much.